Welcome, everybody, to the Synapse Philosophy Group. I'm your host, Dr. Haig John. We've got Rob Crystal, Barry Hobbs, Joe Foley here, Rick Sabona, and we're excited to have our special guest because I've been going through again a lot of Joe Foley's information here about D.D. Palmer, and he's written some really good information. I'm covered in notes here and highlights and things. So welcome everybody. Thank you, Joe.
Great to be here.
So we've been reading D.D. Palmer's 1910 book. We're at page 637. We've knocked out a good chunk of that book. And you know what? We've skipped a little bit here and there because some of it is just pretty meaty. They are a lot of, seems like, class notes and school stuff and things you're teaching in osteology and immunology and things that he needed to get through. And you mentioned some of that stuff in here. And, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you have been working on, what this project's about, and fill us in a little bit.
Sure. This article that's been published in the Association for the History of Chiropractic Journal actually was published almost 10 years ago. Started really working on it probably 12 years ago. I had a copy of these notes that were typed notes, obviously from D.D. Palmer, and I had them for a while. I'm not even sure where I got them from. They were presented as being like D.D.'s California notes. There wasn't really a lot to them. Nobody really talked much about them, but I was working. Actually, I was sitting over here in my chair and I had them printed out and was looking through them. I was like, I've seen the titles before and just couldn't quite figure out. I was like, and so I pulled out my 1914 book and looked at a chapter heading and looked at this title and looked and said, well, that's a chapter here, and looked at another and said, well, that's a chapter and that's a chapter. So I cleared off my coffee table and started laying them out. I was like, this is 20 of the 24 chapters in the 1914 book. And as you looked through them, you could see that there was at the bottom of some of the chapters, it would say reference my 1910 book, page 245 on this subject. Some of them had some comments about California, and just realized these were precursors to what ultimately became the 1914 book. D.D. traveled, like the seminar series, he traveled in 1913 over several months to Oklahoma City, traveled and did some sightseeing. He was in Davenport for over a month, and he lectured at all the chiropractic schools there, and just realized these were the typed notes were lecture notes from D.D. Palmer. He was teaching at the Radcliffe School in Los Angeles, so it could have been from there. And that just started me realizing what these was. And I don't want to say I was the first person to make that connection, but I've never seen that before. I've never seen anybody else make that connection or comment about these notes. So probably over a 2-year period of time, it took me to research what they were, the components of D.D. and his travels, and really came up with the article that was published almost 10 years ago that shows these were early lecture notes of D.D. Palmer, and these ultimately became the 20 of the 24 lectures published by his widow after he passed as the 1914 book, The Chiropractor.
Because there's a lot of, chatter about that book. Some people really, they don't like it being in chiropractic. There's a lot of gossip about it and very few facts. And so it's so nice to see you've dug in very, very deeply into the timeline and really getting a good, clear view of where D.D. was, where he was progressing, where he was teaching from Portland to Los Angeles, and then those letters written. But now, I've heard even, stuff. We did actually a podcast with another gentleman. He said all of them are all out of order. It's not the way it's meant to be. His wife was Mormon, very religious, so she put that one first, but it really makes no sense whatsoever. to me, I think it's a perfect way to start off the whole book and really creating the mission with the chiropractor. Make, if this is not your religious duty, make it your moral duty to
Mm-hmm.
go take care of the people. And that's the way I read it. Like, yeah, okay, let's go. Um, have you, do you have any insights of that, or where some of that, misconception?
The
There are lots of different ones.
I've been, my wife and I practice together. We run a mom and dad, family, kids, subluxation centered family practice for 35 years. I was graduate from Life. I've been through all kinds of seminars for years and years and years in the philosophical world of
Mm-hmm.
Fred Barge and Reggie Gold and
Yeah.
Sid and just all the who's who. I was there and participated. And you're right, this book is not commonly known, first of all. And those that know about it generally put it off as being not legitimate. And that's where my space was, my headspace was at the time, was I didn't know what the book was. I've certainly had read the book and was very intrigued by it, but there was certainly a cloud over it to say what is the source of this book. There people said it wasn't Dee Dee's book. His widow wrote it, or somebody ghost wrote it for his widow, or all that. So I really didn't know what it was until I found these notes. And then as I went through the notes there, and the notes, um, who knows what particularly order they were in, the chapters were in. It wasn't
Yeah.
done that way. It wasn't say, okay, here's chapter 1 and here's chapter 2. They were just notes. Somebody else had organized them, somebody else had scanned them. So I wouldn't put any credence in the order in the PDF file that I have of them to say that was meaningful in them. So I don't know how they got into the order. And to say his widow could figure out in order to place them, I don't know. I think in the article I mentioned the letter to Johnson.
Yeah.
In Johnson, in there, in that letter, Dee Dee makes the letter to Johnson clear he's planning on printing another book. He's shocked that his 1910 book is not a bestseller. He's shocked that the profession is not buying his book, and but he has plans to do this other book. It is clearly stated, I have plans for another book. So it's without a doubt that Dee Dee was planning on turning these notes into another small book. I don't know if you've seen any of the other comments in the HC Journal. That's the Association for the History of Chiropractic. That's their winter journal. But I did a letter to the editor in that I found other letters from Dee Dee where he described the notes as an appendix to his 1910 book. That it wasn't necessarily new, but it was meant to help you understand the 1910 book. So again, Dee Dee planned to print this book. Whether he had it laid out in a order for Molly, his wife, or they were just there and she put them together, I don't have any knowledge of how that order turned out that way.
Well, it's a short time span from the day he died and 3 months later, in publishing this book. And, it's funny you say that because I underlined that in red of how he's surprised that chiropractors are not buying more of these books and how that apathy is literally still in
Yeah.
chiropractic today. And where I remember getting this book, I bought one for Pasquale Sarasoli. And because we were talking about it, he said it's very, very difficult to get. And, he didn't realize, I think I bought it on eBay or whatever. And, he wasn't in that electronics life. And I got him a copy and he was so excited because he knew of the book, but didn't have, or he may have actually had an old copy. And I gave him one. I got him one. It was a reprint. So he could write notes in it and things like that. But so surprised that I could get my hands on it. So the old guys, they knew how valuable this information was. And same thing with 1910. What he taught us was digesting, just like we do in this podcast. We read a little bit, like the 1914 book. I mean, there are times we read one small sentence and we talked for 45 minutes about it, and sometimes maybe carried it to the next podcast,
Right.
because there's a lot of meat into it, a lot of philosophy. He also mentions in here this came from spiritual information,
Mm-hmm.
right? In 1914, he also talks about, it's in the Christian world we call this inspiration, which means bring in spirit, and talking about how this is like a download, just like any other inspiration. And he talks a little bit now. I just opened this up where we're in the legislation in California, and he's talking a little bit about, do we change it to a religion?
Right.
What are your thoughts in some of these notes about that?
What I think is first, these type notes give legacy. They give a lineage to say, this is stuff that Dede was writing. Immediately after the 1910 book, he continued to write and organize his thoughts on chiropractic. He was out lecturing on them, and like anybody who lectures, they go through their content and say, I'm going to refine this thought here that wasn't clear. I think I can do that better. And they updated and reorganized and got it better and better and better each time that they did it. That this clearly shows he was doing that. Like there's one article that he mentions was newly done. So in 1913, he did vertebral movements, and Todd Waters and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. And Todd pointed out that's kind of the roughest article in there. Its grammar is poor, its flow is poor. Well, that's one that he just wrote in the summer or fall of 1913. It hadn't gone through this process of being refined. He hadn't given the lecture. He hadn't read it over numerous times and expanded. And these typed notes, as compared to the final version in 1914, each one was modified in some fashion. Fevers was greatly modified. There has huge changes in Fevers. Some of them had content added. Some of them had content removed. All of them, though, were revised in some format, which is what you would expect from someone doing this process, is they're constantly refining their thought. And that's what Dede Palmer was doing. So I think it would be interesting. You said you spend time reading one paragraph and hours maybe discussing and debating of that. There's another version of this. What did Dede originally have in these type notes? And how did he modify? How did he refine that? I think that's something that is kind of our next step to look at. What did he delete? What content did he remove?
Yeah.
What did he refine? And just to understand his thought process is getting to this point, and whether we assume he would have continued to refine it if he hadn't so rudely passed away. We would have expected further refinements of these concepts. And even new ones coming out. I hope does that answer what you were looking for?
Whether it did or not, yes, it did, and it gave me a lot of good information. And it's given me some insight. In reality, is that I follow some of the guys that are researching the original Bibles and old contexts like that.
Exactly.
Where we're getting original stories. And I think, it's such an important thing of really getting the nexus of, okay, I was thinking this and then had a little mind change. We think of artists even, painting on top of other paintings, and we want to know what's behind them, So part of being, I really think of just any chiropractor, knowing our history. We need to know these things to really, I think, serve at our best in chiropractic. People say in history, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. So knowing our history of where we've come from, we don't need to. I keep mentioning Pasquale, but he always says, I've worked this hard so you don't have to. So he's laid it out for us. We've got these things right here for a purpose, so we don't have to redo it, but still getting into their mind, and we can progress as a profession and really progress as servers. I think that's tremendously important. It comes to mind just thinking of Stevenson. And I love this quote. It's in the senior text of Stevenson. He said, we look at this philosophy, it's not finite. We look at it like a child. This is the 1920s. Photographs are brand new. But as a photograph, a child looking at a photograph and then looking behind it to see where the rest of the people are, and going in with child's eyes when we read our philosophy, not a made up mind, is the way I look at it. And, getting new insights like this to me is really, really exciting.
Yeah, again, I like the analogy of the Bible to say, here's the Dead Sea Scrolls and here's a gospel, and say, well, here's what the King James Version says, but here was an earlier version, and there was subtle nuances different. Maybe things were emphasized a little bit differently. And I think that's a similar observation here is, so I think it's important that we look at, that those earlier versions and be able to compare to see what Palmer was thinking, and maybe why he obviously he thought he improved it, but why, and what refinements did he make, I think is insightful. And I'm a philosophical chiropractor and I practice that way, but really I feel like my expertise is more in the history of it. So I know enough philosophy and I practice and live my life in that chiropractic model. But there's others that may be better able to notice those nuances, then I might not be the right person to do that job. But I think that's something that's out there. I think would be insightful to see. There will be more on this. There's Todd and I are continuing to work on this project, and there will be a part 2 that will come out soon. It is in peer review right now, so I wouldn't be able to elaborate too much detail on that, but there will be a part 2 to this that once it makes it through peer review, hopefully it will make it in a future issue of the AHC Journal. And hopefully you'll have me back and we can talk more about some of the newer observations that have come out, because we're always finding more stuff and refining our understanding of history and Didi's concepts, and where do they start, where were they at, and where are they going.
That's wonderful. And, thank you and Todd and everyone else that puts their energy, time, and love into bringing these things to light, putting it down on paper and or in a computer. But so I'm old fashioned. I like to print them out. And but putting in your time, your energy, your love to be able to share that with us, so it continues through generation after generation. And these with the generation of chiropractors really that we're just coming out of, hopefully their archives aren't just dumped, and we can get those little notes dropped in papers, or somebody's grandfather was a chiropractor and he took notes from Didi Palmer, who knows.
It's really changed dramatically in the last, I used to say 15 years, but now we're approaching 20 years with the internet and internet searches and PDF files and all that. And I work with Timothy Faulkner out of Chicago, and Timothy, we call him the Godfather. Timothy is just a ferocious researcher, and most of my content is really coming from Timothy's research there. And Simon is kind of the icing on the cake stuff that is much more of a technical writer than I am, and organizes things into a manner. So our Green Book guide is something that took a long, long time to put together. We probably have 10, maybe 15 years in that project, but that's something that I think there'll be a legacy of that that future generations are going to be able to use that to understand the Palmer Green Books, to get used to reading the Palmers. Like you guys have going through the 1910 book. That's a slog. I've read it. I've read all 1,000 pages of it, but good Lord, it is not an easy read. The Green Book, same thing. But once you get kind of prepared with a foundation of where you are in their process there, you can't just open up volume 1 and start on volume 1, page 1 and go. But there's a way to kind of follow that progression. And we're hopeful that that's going to be helpful to our philosophy of our profession going forward, that they understand what the Palmers were talking about in a manner that's insightful and they can use in their lives and in their practices, and the next generation can do the same thing.
Well, we've taken this in chunks, this 1910 book. We've gone and done other things and come back to it, and now we're really digging in deep on it to try and see if we can get these next 400 pages done. We've done the 1914 book. We've done twice, actually,
Mhm.
because we said, okay, let's read this with new eyes. It's been a couple of years. We've done volume 33, which Fame and Fortune was a amazing book, and actually we translated that one into Spanish to do it as well. And we've done uh, what was our masterpiece, which I love that. I mean, it's you could feel the heart of BJ Palmer saying this is his last year of life. He's handing the baton. This is what I have done. Here's the legacy. You could feel the emotion in it. So, and and we've done many other things. So, but it's a blessing. We keep coming back to D.D. Palmer. And even when we do Stevenson's, what we see so much of his writing is D.D. Palmer, whether he's using slightly different words. And these men were really speaking in quantum physics before that was anything, and creating the language to explain these things that are esoteric. No one's put it down all in one book explaining innate intelligence, life, spirituality, God, educated intelligence, structure and function, all these things. And what Barry has said many times, and me too, and everybody else, is that D.D. Palmer was one of the most learned men in human physiology, especially of neuroanatomy and spinal anatomy, than nearly anybody else in the world at that time, because he got everything he could to digest it. Would you, agree on that?
Didi was largely self-taught. He had
Yeah.
no real formal education. Anything he was interested in, he sought knowledge in, and he sought books for that. So it goes back to his nursery days and beekeeping and things like that. There's a quote, one of the bee people in the bee journals came and visited him, and he made a comment in his report saying, for such a young man, he sure does have a lot of books. So
Yeah.
Didi was a ferocious reader and learner.
Yeah.
It's interesting your comment about his knowledge of anatomy and physiology. It didn't start off that way. Didi, in his later years, really expanded his physiology and anatomy knowledge. A current project that we're working on right now with Faulkner and Senzon is Didi's disciples. So those are the first 23 students that Didi taught, and
Yeah.
it was apprentice style in Davenport, Iowa. There was no lecture notes. There was no books. There was you came and you were an apprentice. You stayed with Didi as he saw patients, and you learned in that mannerism. So it allowed for a lot of clinical experience to take place, but not very much, since there's no notes, there's no books. The formal ideas were hard to transfer. But in going through that process, it really was clear that Didi's anatomy knowledge was not um, um, as high as it later became.
Sure.
But as he realized the necessity of it, he started to buy more anatomy and physiology books. And as D.D. Palmer does, he read them and he understood and he advanced that. But what's interesting is we're studying these first 23 doctors to see their experiences, where they came from, and those that were medical doctors and osteopaths didn't need the anatomy.
Yeah.
Those that were a high school senior, those that were a carpenter, that were a milkman, they did. So you couldn't say, "Oh, I'm coming in and this person has kidney problems." The milkman goes in 1898 goes, "What are kidneys? You got two of them? What do they do?"
Where are they?
Didi wasn't prepared to. Didi knew enough, but he realized to teach, he had to become more. So he did become very knowledgeable in physiology and anatomy, but his initial teaching, and that, as you'll see when you look at our work, it created some problems for our future.
Mm.
Those that he taught came out with different ideas than what he hoped they came out, and it led to misunderstandings of what he was doing and a splintering of the profession that happened really from day one that exists today.
Well, Simon Senzon was in on my podcast, the other podcast to have interviews. And he mentioned some of that interesting stuff on that podcast. I'll let everybody else listen to that one and then also buy your book before I let any cats out of the bag. But amazingness of how, really they all did shape our future in chiropractic, that first class of how important they were. And, and then of course, subsequent classes after that. But, that the disciples of going out and teaching, you mentioned in here, there was a point, I believe he was handing out diplomas for $50 or something, or what was that all about? And you mentioned
It's
Carver. He
yeah.
spends a lot of time in 1910 complaining about Carver.
An interesting. Carver was an attorney in Davenport that knew Dee before chiropractic. They had a
I didn't know that.
relationship pre-chiropractic in the 1880s and 90s in Davenport. Carver actually became a chiropractor going to Parker School, which was he didn't learn from Dee, he learned from someone else. But he was following Dee all along, and they had just had disagreements on what chiropractic was and what direction it should go there. So Dee in at some point in his career was saying, no, you don't graduate until I say you know sufficient amount to go out there.
Mm-hmm.
In later years, whether it was a financial, whether he was just tired, but certainly there was accusations of him selling diplomas and say, here's my book, here's these type notes, which we talked about, and a diploma. I'll sign a diploma for you for $50, and I'm just going to cash in. And I've seen diplomas from Dee Palmer that were not the person who had them testified and said, I never met Dee Palmer. I never attended a single Dee Palmer lecture. I sent him a certain amount of money and I received this in the mail. So that's, nobody's perfect.
No, nobody's perfect.
We all have things about us. So those that glorify Dee Palmer as being a perfect man are mistaken. He was human, just like the rest of us. He had greatness to them and insight and genius that took place. But in the end, he was a human being too, and had all the faults and frailties that each and every one of us have.
Well, when I read that portion in here and you're writing, absolutely, you see the man. And, with me, I understand, slightly of, creating seminars, creating new techniques is what, innate adjusting is. The moments when you're tired, and he's been trying to get this point across to so many people of just, hey, read the book. Here's a diploma. Go out and take care of the people. And, a level of frustration. I can get more people. Let's pass the middleman of sitting in a class,
Could you
from the
imagine
9 month.
though saying, here, new student, here's my 1910 book. Read that and you could go and understand chiropractic and you can go out and practice. How long did it take you to read the night? And you're a smart man who has a solid philosophy of chiropractic before you started reading this, and you still go through and go, I don't, there's no technique in there. There's no, how do you find a subluxation? How do you, there's philosophy that's there, but it doesn't come out easy. It
Oh
doesn't
my
just drip from
gosh.
the faucet there. So to say that would be sufficient for someone to be a chiropractor, no, it's not.
Oh, no, definitely not. But answering that question, I started reading this in chiropractic school I graduated in 2004. I started reading it in 2001. And I started outlining it, and I found this paper. These are my outlines. I outlined to page 400. And then I have a date right on here is 2011. And then after that, I put it down. I was like, okay, I need a breath.
Yeah.
It took me this long.
Yeah.
And we actually started at page 1 altogether, but on my own was trying to outline it and understand it. And I talked to Simon Senzon about it, and he said this is in the works too, is, extracting Dee only out of there, because it is the most misquoted book, period, because people are so used to saying what he has corrected in someone else, and we're so used to saying it incorrectly that we hear it on stage, we hear it from chiropractors all over the place. and just getting the nexus out of Dee Dee Palmer. I think that's going to be exciting. I tried to do it with pen and paper, and it's an arduous task.
It
The
is.
same it is, and the same thing with the 1906 book. I would love to see what was BJ, what was Dee Dee. My venture. I've dug into that one about halfway as well. I would say probably a good 75 to 90% would be Dee Dee Palmer, and then BJ adding some of his things. That's my thought of, my rudimentary introduction to it over the years.
I know Simon is working on that project. We're keeping him busy with other stuff that's distracting him from that, but there are certainly known DD statements. So probably 2 years ago, we published AHC Journal article about modernized chiropractic 1906 and the science of chiropractic 1906, basically saying which was first in
Yeah.
analyzing that. And modernized chiropractic has always been presented as the first chiropractic book, and that is incorrect. The Palmer's 1906 book was first. It was published first and was available to be purchased before modernized chiropractic. So that has been laid to rest. But in investigating that, we looked at their statements from Dee Dee saying he had 200 pages when he last saw the book, and it
Oh,
ended
I didn't
up
know that.
being, so we know about how many pages Dee Dee had compiled, what his intent, and he clearly intended this book, 1906 book, to exist. The idea that, oh, I didn't think chiropractic was ready yet until my 1910 book was a revisionist history. He knew the book was in the works. He participated in it with as a partner with BJ
Oh,
until
is
their
that right?
relationship fell apart. And then BJ actually finished the book. But to say Dee Dee didn't think this book should be done at that time, he was writing articles and he was writing chapters for the book. Just his relationship with BJ deteriorated to the point in 1910. Any comment he made about BJ was derogatory. It was negative, and it was just there was nothing positive he was going to say about his son at that point, which was unfortunate.
That is, it's that's where even within chiropractic, why, people are BJ people and Dee Dee people, and I go a little more towards the Dee Dee Palmer camp. I absolutely love BJ Palmer, and that I really set the tone for a lot of chiropractic history that we have lived through since then, of the rifts that we've dealt with the leadership and people that have come before us. Instead of standing on the shoulders of the giants, we tend to rewrite the history to the way we want it. And so, thank you for bringing clarity. That's an
Both of them
important.
had just sheer genius to them, but
Yeah.
both of them were humans and they had flaws. And Carver, you mentioned Carver. So Carver has a history out there. Carver is largely not the most reliable historian that you're going to see in chiropractic. So stuff from Carver, you want to see, is there some collaboration to it? And in the comment about Dee Dee selling notes, there actually is. Cooley commented and had an affidavit saying, I met with Dee Dee Palmer in Oklahoma City in 1913, and he told me of his plan to sell his book, his notes, and a diploma during this tool. So there is independent collaboration of that. And I think that's in my article
Yeah.
there, the comment about Cooley that we can verify Carver statements by someone else making the same statement.
Barry, you unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, Joe, thank you for everything you do. You're great. You made me think about BJ and Mabel going out to Santa Barbara and visiting Frank Elliott, and underneath the window, and Dee Dee was there, and they didn't see each other. But my other question is this: how well is Palmer Archives in working with you in giving you guys access to the materials that they have on Dee Dee, and or if not, are you going to other sources? Of course, you're going to other sources, but I'm curious as if Palmer Archives is really helping us out to get to some of the original materials that nobody else has.
Palmer Archives is awesome. So I deal with Rosemary in the archives frequently. She probably dreads getting an email from me, but they are attentive. They obviously know who we are, and I wouldn't say we get preferential treatment, but everything that I ask for, if they have it and they have access to it, we're able to get that. Most of the research that's been done that I really feel like is changed in the last 20 years is stuff outside of the archives. So the archives have been gone through thoroughly over previous generations of historians have gone through that. Rolf Peters was there, and Rolf spent many hours there. He went through, so he's got a chiropractic history book that he wrote decades ago that he's there. He's got pictures of the stuff in the archives. The archives is very forthcoming. And Roger Hines there, that is curator of the Palmer Museum Foundation or something like that. Roger's head of the Association for the History of Chiropractic. He's their executive director. We have great relationships with them, and there's occasions where we see this from some other source. Is there anything you have that can help confirm or verify this? And again, they provide us everything that we need. I don't have any indication that there is something people put out there, oh, they're hiding stuff, they don't want us to see this. I don't think, as far as chiropractic history, that there's anything out there that is being kept, that we can't see, that there's a secret there. I see no indication to support that from my experience with it. One researcher was looking at stuff, and he went there and said, I saw this before, and got confused, and it was a boxing number. They have so much stuff. Oh my God, they have a whole building, like 4-floor buildings of stuff. They have climate controlled where everything compresses together, boxes organized. If you're not asking for the right box, the archives go up. They don't know what's in every single box. You got to give them this box, this material. They can pull that up, and they're going to open up and see what's in there. But if you don't give them the right box, they're not going to know, oh, that's in box 2 boxes down. There's no way you could know everything that is in there. Is an unrealistic expectation. Does that answer?
You did answer. And, I've gotten some things from, Rosemary, and the people at Palmer have been absolutely amazing. Our large prints that we donated to Sherman College, we got permission from the archives, and everybody was really, really excellent and very helpful down there. So a big shout out.
The archives makes nothing. So Palmer has a burden. If you ask me, Palmer has a burden, because they have all the stuff that has to be maintained. It has to be cataloged. It has to be climate controlled. It has to be heated, cooled. There has to be staff. The buildings have to have maintenance done. They have to be insured. They now have to be secured. They have to have security on it. It is a burden, a financial burden on Palmer to maintain and keep this, all just this massive amount, and it produces no income. Right. There's nothing. I mean, I get charged to make copies and stuff. But the last check I sent him was like $38 for copies. Right. I mean, that doesn't pay for staff, or to have 3 staff in the archives. That doesn't pay the bills.
No, that doesn't even pay the electric bill to keep it cool for 1 month.
No,
right?
No, it just doesn't. The expense, and we're all business people. We know what employees cost. We know what insurance costs. We know what, when the air conditioning unit goes out, we know what that. And this is a financial burden and a drain for them that they do with a smile on their face for chiropractic and the legacy of Palmer. But it is a burden to maintain this and keep it, and have me email and say, I want this, and I want it, in a day.
No pressure.
No, who am I? There's, they take care of things in the order that they get them and take care of them. But I'm happy with everything that they do there.
Well, again, like, big shout out to them, and just that responsibility and the love for chiropractic, and for all of us nosy chiropractors that want to know it all, which I think is wonderful. And the more of us out there, the more it makes it worth it. Donate some money to them and help them out, everybody. Joe, I mean, anything else you'd like to enlighten us about this? I send everybody a PDF that Joe shared with me, and thank you for that. And anything else you'd like to share with us
Really,
about
all the
projects?
stuff that's being done, that's out there, is being published in the AHC. So if you're not a member of the Association for the Chiropractic History, again, that's the best kept secret in the profession. People ask me, well, where do you know about that? Well, because it's a published paper. It's gone through peer review. Other people have had eyes on it. They've scrutinized it. It's not like social media where somebody can say whatever they want. Or frankly, if you're printing a book, you can put anything you want in your book. You publish it, you can do it. But in a peer-reviewed journal like that, it's gone through some level of scrutiny, of fact checking. But there's tremendous amount in the last 15 years. There's just completely rewritten chiropractic and D.D. Palmer's history there. If you're used to reading Old Dad Chiro, Maynard's Healing Hands, if that's your source of what you know about D.D. Palmer, there's a whole new opening of what we know about DD and understanding who he was and what was important to him. It's just a fascinating thing to take place, but it mainly largely gets published in the AHC journal, and each issue there's nuggets in each issue. Some, our philosophically group may not say, oh, I didn't enjoy that article, but there's always something there that advances our understanding and knowledge of our exciting history.
Yeah, that's amazing. And if you can, I'll have this one posted in the next couple of days. I'm a little busy with this event coming up, but if you can, make sure I have the links, and I can put it in the body of the this on YouTube, and when we post it, so we can have the links to those things. Because
Sure.
the younger, I was going to say younger chiropractors, but I know chiropractors practice 30, 40 years that don't even know about these things.
Yeah, it's tremendous. I mean, it has completely changed our understanding of DD. Is just exploded with things that we didn't know, and stuff that is wrong. That was just wrong. It was in Maynard and it was wrong. It was an Old Dad Chiro and it was wrong. So correcting some of the errors out there and really portraying them in the light that they deserve. And said they're not perfect, but it's pretty awesome what DD knew, when he knew it, how early he knew it. I have a letter from him from 1892 that is just this insight that he has. Just, it's amazing that he knew that. And his ideas of inflammation, and we're seeing right now in our modern society the role of inflammation. DD knew what inflammation was, and he understood that was a major factor in disease process, and subluxation was causing it. It's just amazing. He was correct, not on everything, but he was correct very, very early.
He does mention inflammation and fever quite a bit. He
Yeah.
does throughout both books pretty much. But yeah, and understanding these things, it's important. So he was on target. He was a genius, truly a genius, a man before his time. And I really feel, and we've said this all before, we're getting back to the age of DD, and seeing now he was ahead of his time then, and now is his time again, of really getting to know the man. And let's not forget about BJ Palmer, the absolute, genius, gave us everything he had. He put it all in there, put it all on the line, so we could have the volumes of green books that we have. One of the reasons of doing even this podcast is to make sure we have these books, even if we're reading them out loud, we have that audio file that eventually we could take all our chatter out, but and at least have the written word in MP3 or whatever it is in the future. So I thank you, Joe Foley, Dr. Joe Foley, and all your other compatriots you mentioned, who've really helped us get a deeper understanding, knowledge, and respect for the giants' shoulders that we're standing on, the father of chiropractic and the son of the father of chiropractic, and then everybody up till now. So we truly appreciate you and all the hard work you've done, and I can't wait to read more of it. I'm excited about some of this new stuff.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be in the next issue. And again, we're in peer review right now, and not my first time, so I'm optimistic that we will make it through that process and actually get published. And hopefully we can come back and we can discuss that that new information, updating this article. I'm glad you were able to share that article with your group. If anybody has questions, they have other comments, I'm very accessible. I go to practice. My kids are grown and gone. My wife would love to have something else for me to do besides be underfoot for her. So I'm very accessible. If you have any questions, comments, it's reach out to me, and I'm happy to help you understand anything that I can.
Well, we appreciate that. And, I feel blessed to be a chiropractor and have such chiropractors around me. And like I always say, this is the 1% of the 1% on here that, changing lives, serving, and creating a future for chiropractic and humanity. Well, thank you, everybody. This Saturday, I'm just a shameless plug of Save the Babies in Atlanta. And I've got a paper in peer review right now. It's been like 5 months. And I'm like, this is my first. And I've already lost all my hair. I have nowhere else to go. And, but I'm presenting my unpeer reviewed paper and some of that work of basically it has to do with birth trauma and the role of chiropractic care for the future of our babies in healthcare. So that's going to be Atlanta this weekend, actually on Saturday, 9 a.m. And Innate 100, if you register, that'll give you 100% discount. So I hope to see as many people as possible. Our room is almost full already. We're in C127, the big one at Life University. And I want to thank all Life University and Dr. LaMarche and Maggie and all the amazing people at Life University that have helped put it together. And all of you, I appreciate you all. And next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Joe, you can come in anytime. And next week, we are going to be reading. We might be in the sympathetic nervous system. We did measles, poignant for the moment. We did it last week. And and there's some philosophy in there and some good stuff. So I'm going to be posting this one and measles this week. Okay. Bless you, everybody. Thank you very much. And I'll see you next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
If you don't see you Saturday. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.